Hi, I'm Pam Fox. Thank you for watching my channel. So today's video is why I think Christians should be vegans. And first of all, I'll start off by saying that I am a Christian and I am a vegan. And I'm not going to go verse by verse through the scripture and point out all of the areas where the Bible talks about animals or food or sacrifice or any of that. In fact, when you do that, you can find several scriptures that support animal eating, and you can find several scriptures that support plant eating. It kind of goes back and forth, although I will say that there are many scriptures that I've heard throughout my life, not just since I've been vegan, that Christians use, scriptures that Christians use to defend meat eating that really don't make a lot of sense if you place that scripture within its actual context instead of taking it out of context to use it as a defense to eat animal foods. So really I have three reasons why I think Christians should be vegans, and I am speaking to Christians here. If you're a non-believer, a non-Christian, I'm not speaking to you because you don't believe the Bible, and so what I have to say really doesn't matter to you. But I am speaking to Christians, and I do believe that Christians really should be leading the way when it comes to veganism and a plant-based diet. And I believe that for three reasons, and here they are. So the first reason takes us back to the beginning, to Genesis, where in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. He created vegetation, he created the animals, and he created humans. And God, it says in the Bible that God planted a garden, which I love. God planted a garden, and he placed Adam and Eve in the garden, and he told them, here's your food. And it was the plants. It was the food dripping from the trees and coming up out of the ground. Here is your food. It was the food for humans, and it was the food for animals. So why do I believe this is a good enough reason for Christians to become vegan? Is because that was God's intention for us in the beginning. It was ideal. And really that's the question, is what is ideal in terms of the human species diet? And if we look as Christians to the scriptures for the answer, we find it right there in the beginning. We find that God planted a garden, he placed Adam and Eve in it, and he said, here's your food, eat the plants. So we know that, as we as Christians believe that he created humans, he created us with certain physiological needs, he created the plants to meet those needs. And when I say that it was so in the beginning, it actually reminds me of when Jesus was challenged by the teachers of the law regarding divorce. So they wanted to know, what about divorce? Because Moses allowed men to get a certificate of divorce, give it to his wife, and send her on his way. And so they wanted to know, what about divorce? And Jesus's answer was, don't forget that it wasn't so in the beginning. It was due to the hardening of our hearts, the hardening of man's hearts, that Moses permitted divorce. So if we look to the beginning for what God's best was for us for marriage, you'll see the same thing. You'll see that man was to leave his mother and father and cleave unto his wife, to go forth and multiply, and what God has put together, let no man separate or put asunder. So that was his best for us. That was his initial intention, until the hardening of the hearts, until sin entered in, which we as Christians can blame just about everything on sin, can't we? But the same can be said for our diet. So we had Adam and Eve in the garden, and they were eating the plants, and then sin entered in, and everything changed. So we know as Christians that the punishment for sin, unfortunately, is death. And so when Adam and Eve committed the sin, an animal had to die, blood had to be shed, because the punishment for sin is death. And God made clothes for Adam and Eve. So that's the number one reason I believe Christians should be vegan, because it was God's intention from the beginning. The number two reason, we can fast forward to Jesus, when he was questioned. We've got all of these laws, we've got the 10 commandments, you're giving him the Sermon on the Mount, telling us all these things, the way we should live. So he was questioned, what's the number one thing? Like, if you could sum it up into one law, what would it be? And so Jesus's response was to love the Lord thy God with all your heart, and to love one another. And so why wouldn't loving one another include animals? Many people I know are very compassionate and loving towards animals. Some of them are more compassionate and loving towards animals than people. And they're not even vegan. We tend to divide animals into, these animals over here we have compassion and love towards, but these animals over here, livestock animals, that's okay. We can abuse and torture and kill them. And really, I believe that we do that because we love those foods. We're taught that it's normal and acceptable. And so we turn a blind eye to it and we go into denial so we can continue to support our bad behavior and eat those foods. That's how I see it. But Jesus commanded us to love one another. So the third reason I believe Christians should be vegans is we're going to fast forward to the end, not the end of the Bible, but to end times prophecy. And we know, as Christians, we believe that there will be a kingdom age where Jesus Christ will return and he will reign as King of Kings for 1,000 years here on earth. And why that is, I'm not really sure. My own hypothesis is that it'll take 1,000 years to clean up the mess. You know how when you go into a campsite and you're told to leave everything, cleaner than you found it? I think that's what that 1,000 years is going to be about. But anyway, it's supposed to be 1,000 years of peace. And you can't have peace with killing. And so I believe that we will become plant eaters once again during that 1,000 years. So those are my 3 reasons why I believe Christians should become vegans. And it really lines up with the scientific evidence that we have today that does say that a plant-based diet is the healthiest diet for the human body. And it lines up with the anecdotal evidence which for me was very powerful when I began my plant-based diet. More powerful than the scientific evidence was going on, for example, Dr. John McDougall's website and watching all of the testimonies where people with just about, think of a disease, you name it, it was on there. People were going on a plant-based diet and they were getting well. And so that was very powerful for me. But as a Christian, I wanted to know, what does God say about the food we eat? And it was very easy to find it right there in the beginning of the Bible that his best intention for the human body was to eat plants. And that was very powerful for me as well, because for me, when I was considering going on a plant-based diet, I was probably like most people. I didn't want to do it, but I was desperate in terms of my health. I really wanted to try it to see if it would work for me the way it was working for so many other people in terms of healing. But I didn't want to give up the foods because they're delicious and they're my favorite. And I also didn't want to go on the diet because I was pretty sure I would fail, because I would want to continue to eat the delicious foods that were my favorite. And so I didn't want to set myself up for yet another failure. But that was very powerful for me, knowing that God's intention for us back in the beginning was to eat plants. So there you have it, why I think Christians should be vegans. And it's such a wonderful thought. Christians, setting the right example in all aspects of life. Isn't it a wonderful thought? But in terms of loving one another, all others, in terms of loving ourselves and giving ourselves our best, plants for healing, for fighting disease, for preventing disease. Yeah. So that's it for today. I do thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.